What's going on, folks, and welcome back to the world of Eternum. Over the past 7 days or so, we've been playing New World non-stop on stream and having such a blast. The build I've been using during this time is what we've classified as the Paladin Build, a tank character that's capable of healing a decent amount and almost as much as a regular healer would be. Just recently, we had the very first War of El Dorado server go down, and I ended up soaking about 500,000 damage. So today, I'm here to bring you this build and break everything down in depth. Let's get started. So the first thing to remember is that New World features diminishing returns on its attribute system. This was also updated even more so in the 2nd June update, so the main reason the Paladin build can be viable is because the difference between 250 con and 300 or 400 isn't going to be that much in comparison to the healing capabilities. For example, at 250 con by itself, a character will have around 12,800 HP. At 300 con, you'll see about 1,000 health increase, which would bring you to about 13,900. But what we could do instead is take that extra 50 points alongside any more we're able to get and keep our con around 250 when we first get to end game and start dumping more points into focus. My theory was if you tried it this way instead of going full con, maybe you could offset the extra health by having a lot of healing power instead. Now when we first reach end game, we'll probably have around 480 to 500 total gear score. This equipment will more than likely be giving us about 15 to 20 total stat points per piece, like 10 con and 7 focus on one piece of gear, for example. When we reach the point of getting around 550 to 600 though, you'll start noticing gear that will give you about 30 attribute points per piece. When we get to this stage, we'll be able to rack up over 500 total attribute points in all. 190 of these points will come from the ones you get from levels 1 to 60. The rest will come from gear and jewelry. What we could do at this stage is hit about 300 con and then 200 focus, and with the diminishing returns, we'll be healing almost as much as a regular healer would be. The reason for that is because healers tend to benefit the most off of using heavy armor as well. Amazon implemented what was known as equipment loads, and for example, if your armor is light enough to be within the light threshold, you'll get a 20% damage bonus. And with heavy, you'll get a bonus to block stability, which reduces your stamina damage while blocking, and a bonus to crowd control debuffs you apply. After doing some recent testing, it seems that the 20% damage bonus in the light threshold does not apply to your healing output. And on top of that, a while back they made a change that gave heavy armor the highest damage reduction stats for elemental damage and physical, because beforehand, light armor used to have the higher elemental resistance. So essentially, healers could use any armor sets and it wouldn't make much of a difference to their healing output aside from whatever stats they're getting from the pieces. And as a paladin, this empowers the build and brings it closer in line to real healers even more. Now when you're looking for gear to obtain for this gear set, we want to stick primarily with the cleric gear, which gives us primarily more focus than constitution, and in late game we want to focus on obtaining nomad gear that gives us more constitution than focus so we can reach that 300 constitution threshold more easily. A really good thing to note is that early on you will benefit off of buying faction gear, which will give you the full set of 280 gear that you can switch the stats of. How you do this is you buy the faction gear from the vendor, and also don't forget to do the promotion quest periodically so you can buy better gear over time, and take that gear in your inventory along with the Marauder seal and bring them to a crafting bench. You should then see a recipe pop up that allows you to change the default stats to whatever suffix was on the seal that you bought. As you level up, this will let you continue to raise the stats you want for the Paladin gear set. The stat distribution while you're leveling won't fully matter, but you can do as follows. From levels 1 to 20, you can put your points only into Constitution. After this, if you don't have at least 60 focus, go ahead and start committing points until you have about 60 plus focus with both your stats and gear combined. As you approach level 35, you want to make sure you have at least 120 con, and if not, start putting more points there. By about level 40, you should have about 75 to 80 focus, and you can stay in that range or slightly above with whatever extra focus your gear is giving you. From this point on, go ahead and continue putting points into con all the way until you get to about level 45. Then get up to about 100 focus and leave it there. Dump the rest of your points into con all the way to 60 or until you get 250 con and leave it there. Then put the rest into focus, and eventually we will want to aim for that 300 con, 200 focus point for the final form of this build. For weapons, we will of course be using sword and shield and life staff as a paladin, unless they develop another focus weapon in the future, perhaps a one-handed mace. For the skills and passives, we'll start with the sword. For this weapon, we will want to take almost everything in the defender tree. Shield Rush, Shield Bash, and Defiant Stance for the skills, and all of the passives besides elemental resistance and high grip. All of these passives collectively will help you as a paladin, and if you want to rotate any of these out for PvP situations, you can take Final Blowout and get high grip. For the Swordmaster side, we can take the 3 passives known as Achilles Heel, Freeing Justice for the debuff cleanse, and Mobility for the blocking movement speed. After all that, the sword side of this build is complete. For the life staff portion, the first thing to note is you want to make sure you go into your game settings and turn off targeted healing for this build. This allows you to have a quicker camera turning speed while channeling Sacred Ground and allow you to instant cast it on yourself slightly faster, which will be one of the bread and butter parts of this build. For the spells, we want Sacred Ground, Beacon, and Orb of Protection. Aside from Sacred, we have two very effective instant cast abilities that are great for Paladin. Here's where we explain why. So like I talked about in previous situations like my ultimate weapons guide, there are certain abilities that you can place down that will stay in effect even when you switch weapons. For some, it will disappear immediately, such as Defiant Stance on the sword or Berserk on the hatchet, but one for example that would stay is Ice Pylon from the gauntlet weapon. When you place this down and switch to another, the Ice Pylon will stay there. But then we have the 3 spells on the life staff. So Sacred Ground, Beacon, and Orb of Protection can be placed down in succession, and you can switch back to your sword and tower shield to continue tanking. We want to take the tower shield to get the most damage mitigation possible from the shield we use. So with these spells out, we'll have a constant heal over time going while being able to tank anything on our own as well. The fact that in the end we'll be building our character as a healer would means that we'll be able to effectively keep ourselves alive while doing what we do best. For the passives, you will want to fully upgrade Sacred Ground and fully put points into Beacon, or at least a second upgrade called Radiance Blessing for the longer Beacon time. You'll want to only put 1 point into upgrading Orb of Protection though. The reason for that is for some reason when we get the second and third upgrade, Shared Protection and Aegis, instead of the Orb of Protection staying on us when we switch back to Sword, it'll disappear. I'm still not 100% why it does that, but either way, just take the orb itself in the first passive known as Protector's Blessing. And a little trick I like to do with the orb is that you can aim it on the ground to cast it on yourself, which gives a 15% fortified damage reduction buff for 20 seconds, and then you can switch to your sword and shield to pop Defiant Stance, which coupled with the final countdown upgrade on it will altogether collectively give you about 65% damage reduction. And this should also combine with defensive training passive on the sword that gives you more fortify when you block as well. For the passives on the life staff, you'll want Absolved on the healing tree, then Blissful Touch right below it, but you can pass on getting Mending Touch. Then you can get Desperate Speed so you can speed up your cooldown recovery time, Sacred Protection so you get that brief 10% increase in maximum health, Revitalize to further reduce cooldowns when you're attacking with the life staff basic attack, Enchanted Justice that gives you a heal over time after you get hit that still stays on you when you switch back to the sword, and if you have enough points or want to spec more heavily into this tree, the ultimate on this side known as Divine Blessing will serve you well. Then for the right side, you can go ahead and get Bend Light for that 20% more effective healing for 5 seconds, Protector Strength that gives you a healing bonus while you have a buff, which will be good with the orb, Glowing Focus so you can get that extra 20% duration, Protector's Touch if you have enough points left and want to really stack up your Fortify buff, but this one only lasts 3 seconds so it's not too crucial. And lastly, get Balance for the haste effect while below 50% health, which will come in handy. And that's everything for both trees. Now by this point, you've probably seen how we have a ton of damage mitigation and heal over time combinations that synergize very well with each other. One more thing that goes well with all of this and why we want to aim for getting 250 con by the time we reach endgame, the milestone we get gives us 80% damage reduction when we take hits at full health. So that's even more damage mitigation to add on to everything else, which is great since the 300 con milestone isn't as important in comparison. Now the trade-off with this build comes when we get to the damage aspect. What we can do to offset this a little bit is to always make sure you have 2 swords readily available. The first sword you will socket a Carnelian gem into. This will be used for tanking during expeditions and open PvE, since you will be able to change your skills to taunt, and the second sword will have an amber gem. The reason we want an amber gem for the second one that we'll use for solo player versus environment and PvP situations is because the amber gem takes a portion of the weapon's damage and converts it to nature. That damage can then be upscaled based off our weapon stat or our focus stat, whichever's higher. So that's where that little bit of damage increase to get us more in line with regular DPS will come from. It won't be exactly the same damage as if you had spec'd into full strength, but it'll be something. And as you get the higher tier gems, more of the damage gets converted to nature, so that means more upscale damage in the end. Perks that help with this build start with anything lifesteal related, so you can get that slightly extra heal while DPSing at the same time. Then look for Bless for that increased healing bonus and Revitalizing Beacon to increase the power of Beacon specifically on yourself. After that, you'll want to aim for any other obvious ones you see that should help, any threat generation perks on your gear for PvE purposes, even more increased Fortify buffs by placing Sacred Ground or doing Shield Rush, things like that. For anyone looking to counter this build, The one time I would recommend the throwing tree for hatchet is for this situation. You need to look for perks and skills that reduce target healing efficiency and ones that might do the same thing in the future. We also have a lack of damage and gap closing options, so you can kite us and also spam crowd control while taking our health down over time. Also in territory wars, repeaters are incredibly effective against both people and regular tanks plus paladins. With about 10 shots of that, we will have a high chance of going down. And that's all that you need to know currently about the Paladin build. For gems for your life staff, I would go with Diamond since that gives you increased damage and healing output at maximum health, which you should be at most of the time due to your healing potency. For gems and gear, you can do Onyx for the physical resistance in PvE, or for PvP, you can do Emeralds if you feel like you'll have a high number of thrust damage people on the other side, which there normally is since rapiers, muskets, bows, and spears all use that damage type. Or you can do Moonstone for slashing resistance, or Onyx if you feel like there will be more of that damage type instead. Hope you all have fun with this, and thank you very much for watching. Farewell.